In this lesson, you will learn how to create, structure, and weight requirements in Tricentis Tosca. The classic testing lifecycle begins with defining the requirements of the software to be tested. This means identifying the criteria which the system is expected to fulfill. These criteria are the system requirements. A requirement can be a functional need for the application. For example, a user should be able to order a product with a Visa credit card, or non-functional, for example, system security. Defining requirements allows both developers and testers to have an overview of what processes and functionalities are needed by the project. In a waterfall approach, this means defining the requirements for the release of the entire application, whereas in an agile approach, this means defining the requirements for a specific sprint or build release. Once requirements are defined, they can and should also be risk-weighted. This means determining the level of risk, either financial or otherwise, associated with the failure of a particular requirement. This is important because it assists testers in deciding where to start testing. By keeping track of which requirements have already been tested and the results of the test executions, testers then have a good idea of the state of the project. In other words, how much of the business risk has already been covered and how much is left to be done. Developers then can also use the risk-weighted requirements to prioritize functionalities and bug fixes. This risk-based approach to testing ensures that we have the minimal amount of risk that a release of our application will result in losses or damages. All of this can be done in Tricentis Tosca using the requirements section. In the requirements section, it is possible to set up the requirements, structure them, and to risk weight them. Once all of this is done, the requirements can be linked with the other sections of Tosca, such as test case design, test cases, and the execution list section. This enables you to use it as a dashboard to have full oversight over the progress of the test portfolio and to create reports for the management. Before you begin the physical setup in Tosca, you will need to determine the best way to gather your requirement data. You either start building the requirements from scratch in workshops with the business department and other stakeholders from the project, or you can use an existing structure given to you by a business analyst. Functional and technical description documents may also be used as sources for setting up the requirement structure. To begin in Tosca, it is highly recommended to first create a folder structure in the requirements section, reflecting the system structure or the testing process. You can structure these with subfolders as needed. This same folder structure can then be used in other sections as an overall project folder structure. Within these folders, requirements will be organized within requirement sets. These requirement sets contain groups of requirements which represent different aspects of the application. For example, front-end, back-end, or non-functional in a waterfall project. Or requirement sets can be set up to reflect testing process-related views, like regressions or sprints. Creating requirements folders uses the same process as in every other section of Tosca. You simply right-click and create the folder. Requirement sets can be added inside a folder by selecting Create Requirement Set or by using the shortcut Ctrl-N, Ctrl-R. To create requirements within the requirement set, you will select Create Requirement or the shortcut Ctrl-N, Ctrl-R. Requirements can be layered, meaning that each requirement can contain sub-requirements. Requirements should be structured in a way which eliminates redundancies. The structure should be clear, and the structure should not be too deep or complex. In other words, it should be easily readable. The best way to begin organizing the requirements is to define a requirement structure considering the highest level functionalities. For example, customer, account, products, order process, and continue by expanding these levels by adding sub-requirements. The lowest level of sub-requirements, or leaf requirements, should be modeled down to the level of use cases or user stories. Anything more specific is too detailed. Good structuring and naming up front is important to maintain a good overview of the entire project via the requirements section. In order to support an agile structure and to reflect continuous delivery, the requirements structure can be set up according to the testing team's sprint. Each requirement is named after the user story and should be numbered. To put this into perspective, we can look at an example from the demo webshop. In this example, we will begin in the requirements with requirement set called demo webshop, which will contain a requirement set that will be used as a container for all of our front-end requirements. Here now, we can define all the needed requirements for the release of the front end of our application. The highest level of requirements will be customer tasks, handling products, shopping cart related requirements, and order process requirements. Once these higher levels are defined, more detailed requirements will be specified. For example, customer task consists of registering, logging in, modifying account data, and checking previous orders. This is specific enough as the various ways to test the logging in process, for example, will be considered test cases used to test this requirement.